No. Okay.
This is like a little roller coaster. You could make this a real fun experience for us if you want.
I could test everyone's vertigo.
Right.
So that's excellent. What else should a neurologist do?
That's assuming everyone has vertigo.
Everyone's capable, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I know I am. So yeah, no, I like a roller coaster ride every now and again. If you're comfortable, we can go ahead and proceed and do our thing.
Sounds great, but it's okay. We're good. Great is the enemy of good, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's funny that you said iPhones are great. I don't happen to fit into that belief system, but if
Ooh.
you want to, that's fine with me.
Now, is that an ethical stance or is that a functional stance
It's
with the
both,
iPhone?
actually. With me, it's
Uh-huh.
always both.
Uh-huh. Sure. I mean, I think with most of us it is.
Yeah. Stedron, welcome aboard. What an unusual name. We're going to talk about your name first because that's where we're starting. Stedron is your last name. Shafer is your first name. I'm assuming you're a Czech descendant.
I am, but my last name is not really mine. It was a gift from my husband to me, but he is Czech as well. My family is here in America, but we have roots in Czechia and the Czech Republic. Although my grandmother, if she was on this call, she'd say, "Excuse me, no, we're Bohemian." Because if anyone knows anything
Right,
about that area of the world, it's like, no, you're Moravian or you're Bohemian. So we were
right.
Bohemian,
Yeah,
not
that goes
Czech.
back prior to the Czech Republic. That was Bohemia, which is really kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, with your interest and expertise in food, I mean, you can get into the different cultures of food and the Czech food, Moravian, Bohemian, and then the Roma people and what they bring to the table. And that's actually kind of a new thing in the Czech Republic that now there are actually Roma restaurants, and there never had been Roma restaurants in the past where people can go and sample their heritage through food, which we all know is such an important part of our heritage and connecting with other people. So it's really a fun place to try food and just to travel in general.
Do you think that they're boosting that part of it up because of tourism and they want to bring the tourist dollars in there?
I think in part it's that there's opportunity there that they didn't necessarily have before because of social changes. Because people who are Roma in Europe, here in the States and in Hawaii, we don't necessarily have a great understanding of their social experience. But there, it's still a very segregated society with regards to how Roma are a part of society, a part of the food culture, a part of the work culture. And so it's really beautiful. And in the Czech Republic, there are only two, last I checked, there are only two Roma restaurants, which is crazy because they're an enormous minority and they've been a part of the culture for so long. But Ambix is in Prague and it's one of my favorite restaurants in the world. And I always make sure to go there and have some, genuine Roma food. And the owner, Lucy, she's incredible and her family runs it. And they have musicians come in from the Roma community and play their traditional music. And it's just such an amazing opportunity to interact with people that you don't necessarily have the opportunity to spend that time with, to talk to them, to learn about their lives, to learn about their dreams. And they want to develop museums and places where people can go and see Roma art. So getting into people's lives through food for the Roma people in Czechia, it's like opening a doorway into just bringing people into their world and being more accepted into that society too.
Can you give us a little bit of an overview of the Roma background of the Czech Republic, Bohemia, etc.?
Mm. Well, I'm definitely not an expert in that. I have a special interest in it just because of my own family history and also my husband. So his name is Jakub Stedron, and he is the director of the House of National Minorities in Prague. And he's been doing that for over a decade and working with the different minorities that are officially represented in the Czech government to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that not only do they have access to things that help them assimilate into Czech culture, but they also as important or more important, have protections for making sure that their culture, their heritage is protected through festivals that include food and music and clothing. They have publications in different languages, and they'll often be in Czech and whatever language, whether it's even, Russian or Ukrainian. They have all these amazing publications that are making sure that those communities have access to their culture, but also have that duality of access to the Czech culture that they're assimilating into, as well as, the culture that they came from that we want to keep alive.
Hmm. Yeah, the last name Stedron, is that a shortened version, I guess, anglicized version of Stedronova?
So it's not. So in the Czech Republic, what happens, and in other parts of the world too, I think Russia is also the same. When you have a female member of the family, they often have ova added to the end of the name. And it's interesting because my husband and I had planned on getting married in the Czech Republic. And so I had done all of my branding and everything as Shtypronova. But then on a whim, because, sometimes you have to do something on a whim, we
Right.
decided to get married in a city that's very near and dear to us in New York City. And there, even though you'd think that's a cultural hub of the world, that they would, take lengths to recognize cultural differences and things and names, and that you could have that on your, on the certificate of marriage, you can't. So you have to have the same name. If you're taking their name, you have to take their actual name. You can't have that cultural addition of, for instance, for us, ova. So officially, I'm Shafer Stedron, but that's a bit confusing when you go to that part of the world. So it's easier to say both, kind of depending upon which side of the pond I'm on.
Right, right, right. Were your parents of German descent?
German and Czech.
German and Czech, 'cause that's the German part is where Schaefer comes from, right?
Well, I was actually named, so I have a lot of dent in my family, and they work in academics, and they publish books, and so they're in this like really beautiful small world of academia and these amazing minds. And William Shafer was a dentist, an oral pathologist that trained my mother, Susan Sant, and she's quite well known in that world. And so she named me after him. But it's quite funny because I had to rebel and go into medicine, not dentistry. But I would visit my mother. I would visit my mother when she would be doing slides and things over lunch, because where I was studying medicine was just really right across the street from where she practiced dentistry at the time. And so I'd go and listen to how they're seeing the slides, and they'd say, "Oh, the Shafer method." And everyone would kind of look at me really confused, like, "Oh, kind of a big deal. Oh, it's the Shafer method." No, 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 no. I'm named after the gentleman who came up with the Shafer method. I didn't come up with the Shafer method. So it's always been a fun legacy to have that name, and I'm quite proud of it. Just as I am of Stedron, because in Czech it's actually a really beautiful name because it means generous, and I just love that.
You are everywhere. You're not only doing your own podcast, which is called what again?
Talks with Dr. Shafer is mine. Yeah.
Perfect.
And then I also produce my daughter's podcast, which is called What's Up Young Authors. And it's a children's literature focused podcast where she's a young author herself. She interviews either other young authors, or she interviews what we call mentor authors. So adults who have written children's literature.
Well, I'll have to ask her for some tips on how to increase my audience engagement.
Isn't that, I mean, promotion, promotion, promotion. We were speaking, I think, off camera earlier about how I just got back from podcast movement. And again, kind of a piece for people who are interested in podcasting as a medium and how to spread, because we're making this great content. We want people to hear it. We want them to be inspired. We don't do this for any other reason than we are inspired. And when you're inspired, you want to share that message. And so I think it's just constantly doing everything we can to cross promote and have these conversations and bring people into the fold with us and say, hey, we want to share this amazing, not just information, but the aesthetic and the environment that you create in these spaces.
Schaefer, when you're not being a stage mom and you're not being this media queen, when do you have time to fit in being the neurologist that you studied so hard and longed for?
Well, that's a complicated question to answer. So, right now, I practice in a non clinical sense, and that came about in a way that was not really my choice. It was very complicated and involves domestic abuse and some really sticky, tricky years of my life. But, like with anything else, I'm so grateful for that challenge because it led me to self discovery, to doing some really difficult work that I don't think I would have done if I wasn't really kind of in that pressure cooker of you must change, right? This is an untenable situation. And that led to significant changes in my life, which then has also led to significant changes in the lives of people that I care about, whether they're strangers that I'm just now having the incredible opportunity to bring into my life, or people like my children or friends who found themselves in similar situations, and they need to see that reclaiming your story, which is a huge part of my message and what I do on my podcast, and the writing that I do and the communities that I build, encouraging people to reclaim their story, because no one can be healthy without doing so. And just a little aside, that when I look back, and once I went through that healing journey and I got to the point where I could see more clearly as a physician, and I think a lot of physicians, when they get to this point, have a similar experience from having discussions, you realize how much you missed when you were busy being a scientist and a practitioner. If someone comes to see me for seizures or headaches, they've seen 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 other specialists. Wasn't uncommon for me to be the fourth or fifth neurologist someone had seen, right? Well, I want to see the headache expert. I want to see the person that's really good at this, person I was very interested in Botox for headaches and for other disorders. So you'd see them and they'd say, "Oh, I finally got to you, doctor. You're going to be the one to fix me." And sometimes you were. Sometimes it was a physical issue that you could just give the exact right chemical or the exact right modality and fix it. But often with these people who would come to see a specialist because they tried so many things and nothing was getting them over the hump, they were still suffering immensely. The suffering wasn't driven by the neurological disorder. The neurological disorder was there, it needed to be addressed. But until we address the fact that maybe they're unsafe at home, or there are mental health issues that antidepressants won't fix, but maybe mindset training will fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Teaching them self-empowerment, teaching them things that we wish we learned when we were kids, but so many of us didn't, and just compounded over our lives into really unhealthy habits and just an unhealthy life. So, as a physician, going through the experiences that I went through, and then the training I went through, becoming a life coach with Jay Shetty, and just kind of saying, okay, I'm not done being educated. I'm a physician, I'm a neurologist, I have these board certifications, but I'm not done learning. What's a different aspect of the human experience and how I can help someone through that? And how I can take what I understand from a neuroscience perspective and a physician perspective and build upon that, go deeper. And that's what I've done. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity because, again, I look back at those times, I can see it in my mind's eye, sitting in the room with that great privilege of being with people who need help. And sometimes we kind of miss the mark because we're focused on all of these biometrics and the medicines and all the checklists. And the more human and holistic part of the person isn't really being addressed.
Have you been able to step back from medicine as many people know it into this more, let's just say, evolved kind of understanding of people and kind of move away from the big pharma approach to healing and health?
Yes, for certain I have. And I think there is an important place in the world for medications. I mean, we're so blessed to have, certain vaccines and medications, right? They
Mm-hmm.
make our lives longer and healthier. So there's nothing against them. But as I said, that's a small part. Often when you come to see a doctor, you're asking them to fix a problem that is well ingrained into your life. and they're doing a band-aid approach because that's what the medicine is. It's helping with symptom management.
People like you who are doing the education and the technique addition to someone is going to be really, really helpful for their long range, wouldn't it be?
Absolutely. And I think, and that's we were talking on the top about the power of podcasting. For me, so in a different side of things, different perspective, podcasting saved my life, right? Because it's such an equitable way to get information about self-worth out to people, about what is a controlling person in your life. Because again, if you're being abused at home or you're being controlled at home or at work and it's affecting your mental health, if you're experiencing essentially the symptoms that we call burnout, but they're really just moral distress from something that's happening in your life, if you're experiencing those symptoms, you're in an environment often where you are isolated from things that could ameliorate that could help you. And that's the beauty of podcasts, is that I can just put this little earbud in my ear. No one
Mm-hmm.
has to know necessarily what I'm listening to, although you have to be careful in domestic abuse situations because things can be monitored. But if you can safely access, even through your library, podcasts where these amazing experts are just gifting their time and their expertise and having these conversations, it can truly educate and, I really believe, save people's lives.
I just want to go back to what you're saying about mindset and so on. Are you familiar with, was it Dr. Marabia, his communication theory? Because you were talking about how much you love podcasting and
Yeah.
communication and technique. Are you familiar with that?
No, but I'm taking note. Dr.
Oh, okay.
Moravia, tell me.
It's the seven, gosh, what is it? 73855 communication theory. That
Mm,
7% of your communication are the words that are actually understood. That's what the
yeah,
theory suggests. And that
yeah.
55%, or I'm sorry, 38% is your communication is through the tone of your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And the 55% is your body language. So when it comes to communication, only 7% of what you're doing are related to the words that you're speaking.
And
So the words appear to mean less, according to this research and this theory,
yeah.
way less than
Mm,
the tone of our voice, and the tone of our voice means less than our body language. So that's why, for me, I love watching podcasts versus just listening to them, because when I listen to
mm-hmm.
them, I only get two of those factors. But when I'm watching them, like when I'm looking at you and I get a lot more because I can look at your facial expressions and the way that you move and the way that you articulate and gesticulate. And so I was just
Yes.
wondering if that was something you'd ever heard of before.
Yes. I mean, I have in separate studies, I haven't read that book, but obviously there are studies that talk about, 75% is nonverbal communication. And for instance, in medical school, you're told that, but you don't really get the formal training on that. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, sometimes you have behavior model that's not ideal, um, for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's how your attending was trained, or it's just the constraints of your situation, right? If you are seeing 4 patients in an hour, you come in with your laptop. And when you were saying it, I was having this kind of out of body experience, thinking of the stereotypical doctor in the movies where they come in, they don't make eye contact, they sit down with their laptop, they're just type, 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 type. All you see is this part of their head, like their hair, if they have hair, over their laptop. And I actually met someone this week. I met someone this week who was sharing his experience, not a patient, just actually a colleague in podcasting, his experience at the VA, and how he was in a really, really difficult part of his life. And recovering from the emotional experiences that he was having when he left the service and his whole life was changing.
Hmm.
And he was really needing to address those issues within the medical system. And he was in the VA system. And he goes in, they go down to their computer, they're typing, he's not looking at anyone. And then they basically asked a few questions and that was it. And they made a diagnosis and um, they made some assertion about what
Right.
was the driving force for how he was feeling without really polling the audience, without really asking the expert, which is obviously the patient, right? And made some very strong assertions and putting them in the record. They're already in the record by the time they're verbalized to the patient. And he was just floored. And he had a very human response in that moment like, hey, what are you talking about? That's not why I'm here. And he hadn't even really been a part of the conversation and he got a little emotional. And that led to him really being characterized in that system as a certain kind of patient, a difficult patient. And it
Right.
led to being fast tracked to, oh, you need medicine, you need this, you need that, when really he needed someone to listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was the body language. Yeah. Yeah.
That's something we've all experienced, those of us who kind of understand all that's wrong with medicine and all that's right with technique and social skills and people and face-to-face contact.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when, you imagine that doctor coming in and, they're rushed, they literally have to click, they have to meet those metrics. One
Right.
thing that I was discussing with someone this week that they said they did not know about medicine. They knew a lot about billing and such, but they were in psychology and they weren't an MD, they weren't charting in the same way. And we were discussing how, well, so not only if a patient doesn't come, like let's say you don't get paid, right? If you're an employed physician and let's say the patient wasn't reminded that they had an appointment, so they didn't come, the doctor will also be docked and sometimes owe money to their employer because the employer lost money, even though it wasn't the doctor's job to call and tell, it would have been inappropriate for the doctor to call and tell the patient they had an appointment. So now you
Mm-hmm.
have doctors that are saying, well, not only do I not want to lose money because I'm here, I need to pay off my student loans, I need to take care of my family, I need to pay my mortgage. So not only do I need to make sure I have enough patients to make sure that I can pay my bills, right? And keep my administration happy. I also don't want to receive a bill for the hours that I was at work. So what
That's right.
happens then? People are double and triple booked. So now you have a doctor who's like, if everybody comes, they're just focused on typing and getting through this kind of mess that's been created by the system that has nothing to do with the patient. When in reality, the clinic exists entirely for the patient. That's why it's there. But they're left out of the equation in the end.
Yeah, people in medicine, they're working for the man and they're working based on, getting the people in and out of the office. And that's why they're so tied up and married to, oh, I've got a pill for that. See you later. you
It's
know, s-
simpler, it's more efficient, but it really isn't in the long term
right,
because then
right.
you're getting the calls, the side effects aren't working because maybe the side effects weren't thoroughly explained. And you're getting the calls, it's not helping. And then you're trying the second and the third and the fourth drug. And by the way, people who are in medicine know sometimes you really actually do know the magic medicine because when you have experience in medicine in a certain field, you kind of get an idea. You meet a patient and you're like, okay, you go into this group of people I think would really benefit from this modality, from this therapy, this medicine, this treatment. And you've got a feeling about it, and it's based on your expertise, right? That you work so hard to gain. But the problem is, well, I really know you'd benefit from item C on our list. But your insurance, which insurance do you have? Okay, you have this one. Well, they require that we try A, B, and C before we get to D. So even, you don't want to tell the patient that. You don't want them to believe that it won't work. So you're going to try A, B, and C. But you may know based on your expertise that that's really not what this patient would benefit the
Hmm.
most from, right? And so you're putting them through so much to get to D.
Right. And hence, this is why you are a non-clinical neurologist.
It's a benefit to it. I will say I certainly do miss those interactions and discussions about medicine, and they're so fun. And that is one thing that I want to incorporate into the work I'm doing now. I'm going to be creating a series of small books. So I'm going to have the little book of balance, because I would give that discussion probably 8 times a day,
Hmm.
because even if someone's coming to see me for headaches or memory loss, they also have imbalance issues. And I can't
Right.
ethically not discuss imbalance issues, because your memory, that problem is going to progress at this point, regardless of what we do. We can help you, and there are all these important things we need to discuss about. But the thing that might land you in the hospital next week, or cause you to break your hip and die in the next 6 months, is if you fall. That's a big
Right.
deal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you've got to focus on sometimes they're the little things, but they're the big things, and they take the most time. They take the most time
Hmm.
to discuss, but they have the most benefit to the patient. So doing things like writing these little books is my little kind of love letter to the community, to say, listen, I want to make sure you have this. It's not medical advice for you specifically. This is the kind of thing, like, I want my dad to know, right? This is the kind of thing I want my
Right.
family member to know.
So how are you then doing the marketing for the books? Because it sounds like really you're kind of transitioning away from medicine and more into human communication and healing and face-to-face stuff. So how do you market that? How do you promote that? And is there a metric for that?
At this point, I'm very word of mouth. And for me, it's funny, because you to talk to like-minded creators. I don't know, do you have a dream board? Do you have a board that makes everything you're doing make sense?
Are you asking me that personally?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't. My dream board probably fades in and out of probably lives up here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that is on a list or on a post-it note or anything like that. Is that what you
Yeah.
use, that kind of a methodology?
Yeah, for me, and I think so many people who are creative, like, we don't do one thing,
Hmm.
because one, that's not natural. That's something that, is, I think, a part of why we get so far from our purpose and our stories and our self-worth really early in life, when we're teenagers and we're deciding what we need to do, and someone says, okay, you took this personality test, so you should do this, or your family does this, you should do this, right? These are your strengths. And we start getting really pigeonholed into things, and maybe doing it for the wrong reasons, because of our parents, or because of a lack of self-worth, or feelings of fear. And we start focusing our energy on just one thing that may not even be the thing we're good at or passionate about.
Right, right.
Whereas when we lean into our passion, I think you have to kind of zoom out, right? You've got to formulate your big goals, and then come up with the actionable plan, which is something that then is someone like myself, who works with businesses and coaching and individuals and coaching. Okay, for one thing, we need to know who we are, what direction we're going into, because momentum, you can only go in one general direction. We need to figure that out. And then to keep going, we've got to have the steps. So for me, to to answer the questions about, where am I going, where is the focus, it is more holistic, and it's really on this movement of helping people reclaim their stories for their health and happiness,
Hmm.
and doing that in such a way that I'm not just talking to people who are my kind of compatriots in this experience of being my age, being 10 years older, 10 years younger, we're maybe in dangerous relationships, bad marriages, bad jobs that don't suit us, right? We're in these situations that we have felt really stuck in, and we needed someone to shake us and say, hey, we're not stuck. It's not a cage, it's a
Right.
hamster wheel. You can get off, but you need to change your momentum. You need help to do that. And I'm going to help you do that. So the focus is on trying to help people, not only at my stage of development, but then also that's why I produce the children's literature podcast. And that's why I have a children's literature publishing house, Little House of Dreams Publishing, because I don't want to just help people kind of like a doctor, right? I don't want to just help you after you've had your seizure and prescribe the medicine to help the seizure. Can we get this under better control? Can we deal with the things that are making the seizures worse? Can we deal with the mindset problems that are making our lives less comfortable, less satisfying for younger people, right? And so that's why when I take that 360 bird's eye view, zoom out view of my goals, it's to develop, and through media, because media is so powerful, through literature and podcasting, through those means to connect with people and just provide them that little shake, whether it's, a young kid, to just empower them to say, you can write a book. You can do amazing things. My daughter, a few days ago, raised $9,000 for our local humane society in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
$9,000 in a minute, because she auctioned off the opportunity to name two characters in her upcoming book that she's writing to support the Humane Society. It's called Shelter Dogs. And, the plan is for it to be sold in our local Humane Society, and I hope in other chapters throughout the country. And the idea is for people to see their dogs in those stories, be encouraged, not only to remember the beauty that was brought into their lives from the dogs they adopted, but also people who maybe are, have kids and are thinking about bringing a furry friend into the family, consider adoption. But for her to go up on that stage, and just the idea of someone being able to name a character in her book that she wrote, and she's 10, and it's her fourth book. And she was able in a minute to raise $9,000. That changes the way you see your potential.
You should tell her that I am proudly a foster failure.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard
Aren't
that
we
term
all?
before?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have, of course.
So that's
Of course.
great. She sounds like an amazing child.
Our first dog that we adopted. So I was an intern in medical school. So I was working. I mean, you're not supposed to work more than 80 hours a week. That's not what was happening, of course. It was
Mm-hmm.
many, many more hours a week. But honestly, it was, I think, my favorite year of my life. I learned so much, had beautiful friendships, was a part of people's just most difficult moments. Because when you're an intern, you're in the thick of things, and you barely leave the hospital. So you really know. But I would drive past an animal shelter in Indianapolis, Indiana on my way. And I'd always stop, and I fell in love with this dog. She was 4.5 years old. She'd been at the shelter for 2.5 years. And they said, "Oh, you can't have this dog. You don't have a fenced in backyard. You can't handle this dog." And I just kept coming over and over and over and over. Talk about a failure to listen. I wouldn't listen. So I just kept coming, playing with her. Her name was Roxy. Every day I'd go to work, I'd stop. And then one day they said, "Do you have what you need in your car to take her?" And I'm on my way to work. Yeah, I have what I have. I
Right.
actually had everything in the car in case they, on a whim, decided to let me take her. And so I pile her in the car. I quickly bring her home. She hung out with her new father at home while I went to work for my overnight shift. And that was my not foster failure, but you fall in love with these.
Oh, right, right. We were put in charge of trying to put 1.5 pounds on these little baby kittens because I guess my reputation as a chef is fairly well known, and if anyone can fatten you up, it would be me. And so, wifey comes home with two little adorable kitties, and I knew what I needed to do, and here we are 5 years later, and they're beautiful and like the loves of our lives. And I cook them scrambled eggs every morning, and I make them chicken so they don't have to eat commercial food. And they have become my family, my, extension of myself.
We love them so much. And is it two kittens or more than
Yeah.
two?
They're
Two.
two kitten sisters, and they couldn't be more different and yet so alike. So it's just pretty amazing. It is pretty amazing. Yeah, I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier, and you were talking about overcoming abuse and things along those lines. Is that your personal story that kind of got you to where we are now?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I think I, like many other women and men that are in that situation, you lose yourself. And it's that
Mm-hmm.
frog and boiling water
Yeah,
situation, right?
yeah.
Where it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And you could die there, right? And
Oh,
that could
yeah.
be a true death, or it could be just a death of who you are as a person. Arguably as bad, as someone who came back from the brinks of losing myself as a person, and really feeling, the sensation almost of being underwater and your fingers are the last thing that's reaching air, was really where I was
Mm-hmm.
in my journey. And then my best friend said to me, because I shared a bit of what was going on in the third person, not even directly. But I think, when you go back to body language and when you know someone, and you can see that they're struggling, and you can see that, lean into that. Be the person who sits beside someone when you know something's wrong. You don't even necessarily have to ask questions, but just giving that non-judgmental space and giving them space. What my best friend said to me in this moment was, do you know that you matter too? And I'd never considered that. I'm in a helping profession. I'm a people pleaser
Mm-hmm.
in work and outside of work, right? And I'm a hardworking person. I just never even stopped to consider that I was missing out on my own life, in my relationship, and in my work as well, um, by not even considering myself and my
Right.
needs. And that one question, yeah, that was the pivoting place.
That's interesting that that stuck with you. Was that the beginning of you becoming more mindful and understanding that there was a lot of thought that was necessary to think about how you're going to get away from the limbic system, feelings and energy and stuff, and be mindful about what you were feeling and maybe taking the deep breath before you spoke and before you took your next step?
Mm, yes, exactly. And I call it the messy middle because you have this realization. You've compartmentalized and justified so much. You're likely trauma bonded to a person or a job, right? You've got all of these reasons why it's actually your job to fix it and you're failing, right? So you'll just keep going on that hamster wheel of trying to reach the goal that's unreachable. That's unreachable. They don't necessarily want you to reach the goal, because then you get out off of the hamster wheel. Then you are free. Whereas if we keep you chasing a carrot that you can't reach, that keeps you where you are. It does keep you stuck. So you have to decide to break the mold. You can't stay where you are. But that's really hard because we as humans, our brains are not wired to accept that we've made a mistake for days, let alone months, years, decades, right? That we've made mistakes that maybe put us at risk or our children at risk, that we've kind of blinded ourselves and made excuses that really hurt us, or people we loved. That's why, political parties, we vote for the same party, right? We don't necessarily do the deep dive on the person because
Mm-hmm.
we believe in the party. And that's not to get political per se, but it's just a really good example that people can understand. We are so mentally flexible. We have that capability, but it requires painful effort. Otherwise, you just go with the momentum of what feels comfortable and safe. And we know, even if it's not comfortable or safe, and we know we need to do better. And so that time, most people going through this, you're looking at a year or two of introspection and hard work, and sometimes choices that may feel dangerous and may make you feel fearful,
Yeah.
but you have to choose yourself.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if perhaps techniques are more important than philosophy when it comes to growth.
Yes. Habit changing.
So
Mm-hmm.
when you're feeling emotional, like when a little kid is out of control emotionally and
Mm,
they can't really sit back and think about what they're feeling and be able to explain to you, mommy or a friend, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what their next step will be because they're in their emotion. I think that
mm.
if we could teach people the technique to realize and understand that they are feeling something and then maybe take a moment to be able to express that and articulate it, I think we can get past a lot of the danger.
That's past it, right? If you really want to talk to someone in the room, right? Maybe you're attracted to them or you think they're really interesting. And it's not just a passing thing. Like you feel it in your bones. Like, I want to know this person. If you don't go and say hello to them, what are you going to think about all night? That person, it's going to fixate your energy, right? And that's just a really kind of silly example. But
Mm-hmm.
if we're angry and we don't just say anger's here, I'm angry about that, and instead of giving it too much weight or taking it too far, but just saying, gosh, that's making me angry right now, it deflates the whole thing. You just meet it head on. But we're so afraid to just say, I'm angry, I'm scared, and lean into it so that then we can move past it. That instead we stay in its orbit and we stay there almost a prisoner of those emotions that we've never even truly met because we're afraid of them.
Mm, that's so true. It's just difficult to understand oneself, if not
Mm,
everyone else you come into contact with, and then learning how to speak to those people. Like knowing your audience is a really important thing, isn't it?
absolutely.
So let's
Absolutely. And
let's shift some gears here, if you don't mind. We just kind of like,
yeah.
let's make it playful. What have you eaten today, Shafer?
Oh my gosh. So, I got home at 5 o'clock this morning. So my circadian rhythm and therefore my satiety, my hunger, my desire to eat is all over the place, which is a whole nother, neurological thing that can be discussed about the relationship with food. So when I finally woke up after sleeping for the first time in a few days, don't recommend to anyone. Um, I I made myself hummus. That's my go-to. I'm a vegetarian and
Okay.
that's my go-to fuel.
So what do? You open up the can, you rinse it, you pop it in a food processor, you add your oil and your spices, and you grind, and then you dip and you enjoy.
Yes, but the thing that I add that I really love, and there's kind of a naughty thing that I add in there too. I put in some really nice little tomatoes, like grape tomatoes,
Mm-hmm.
something with really nice flavor to it, and onion, olive oil, some spices, garlic if I have it, and I roast that for 20
Mm-hmm.
minutes at
Good.
375. But the naughty thing that I've been doing is putting a little bit of feta cheese in with that and roasting it with
Uh-huh.
the veggies and popping that in with the can of garbanzo beans, like you said. I don't add tahini because I'm too lazy to have tahini in the house.
Right. Although that does add quite a
Yeah,
yumminess to the whole
I'm
product.
sure I need to. It probably is it the umami? Is that coming from the tahini?
Well, it's probably coming from the cheese, actually, if you're adding cheese
Mm,
to
I
it.
am.
But
Yeah.
also it's that nuttiness, that earthiness, that creaminess that the tahini would offer
Mm-hmm.
the hummus. So is that enough for
Mm-hmm.
you to get by? Is there enough protein in that? And, as long as we're talking about you being a vegetarian, how do you get the correct amount of protein into your diet?
Yeah, and then later I took the rest. I love to batch. I batch record and I batch cook. So I took the rest of the veggies that I had roasted, which it's whatever I have on hand that I'll roast, and I put it in some rice. So rice and beans, that's a great way to get those essential amino acids if you're a vegetarian. So that's a way that I do it. Is a lot of rice and beans. Yeah.
I gotta hand it to you because a lot of people just don't understand the benefit of roasting your veggies, roasting your
Mm.
spices, and then putting them all together. It could add so much flavor. Color equals flavor, right?
Yes. So much more flavor. Absolutely.
Okay, so what will you finish your day with now that you've started with hummus? Where will you go?
So I snacked on a little rice before we spoke, just because again my day is so off because of the circadian rhythm being gone. I actually traveled also to I was in Prague last week, and then I
Okay.
was in Washington D.C. this week, and the issues of travel. So my brain and body kind of don't know where I am and what I'm doing. So I may not eat again tonight because my
Hmm.
body, the signal my stomach is telling me, I literally feel it, right? And I'm feeling my vagus nerve then telling my brain satiety has been achieved. I don't feel hungry. I want to make sure that I'm ready to rest tonight and get good sleep, which I haven't gotten. And
Yeah.
as we know, with hunger and making good choices about the food we make, making nutritious choices, a fundamental part of making those decisions is being well rested, being well hydrated. And so I'm very bad on that this week. Not really by design. It was a issue with the flights. But in part by design too, because I was at a convention this week and they only had a lot of processed food hanging around. They didn't have real food. And you're so busy, you're so focused, you're so inspired. You'd have to go so far out of your way to eat real food. But at home, what I try to do is I try to say, if I'm going to have a snack, I'm going to have dried mango, or I'm going to have nuts. I'm going to have something nutritious so that I'm really fueling myself. Because I find if I reach to the thing that, my naughty pleasure that I would love, which is potato chips. I love potato chips. That might be a bohemian thing too. Bohemia, it's like we love our paprika chips there. If I do that, it tastes good for a bite or two, but then I don't feel well and I feel full, but not satiated.
Right, right. Because it's all being kind of buried by the guilt and shame of eating that.
Well, that's a part of it too. Yeah. But I think it's just
Oh, yeah.
it's not even meeting my nutritional needs.
Right,
So, and it's also a very high caloric food that doesn't take up a lot of space. And we know when we eat, that's another cue that our nervous system is sending us is about the barrow pressure, right? The nerves that are being pushed on. That's one of the signals that we get. And the ghrelin, other signals, neuropeptides that tell us, okay, we don't need to eat anymore. So if we eat too fast or we eat foods that are high calorie but low density, low in fiber, they're not pulling the
right.
water in, you're not going to get the right signals that really tell you what's going on with your body and your nutrition. So you have to be so careful. And I do try to be mindful of that, but I
Oh,
recognize
that's
it can be
good.
so
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
It can be hard. Did you know that the human animal was designed to continue to eat and eat and eat until it gets its share of the amount of protein that it needs?
Hold on one second. My earbud went out. I'm so sorry. Pop in
You
another one.
see? So now we're even because it's happened to both of us during the show. Yeah, I'm so anal about wanting to have the quality be good for all three of my subscribers. So
I understand
yeah.
fully. And I'm pretty sure you have more than 3 subscribers. Is it going to ruin the video if can you pause it and edit it and I go grab a different button?
Oh
Because
yeah,
this one
sure,
for some
sure,
reason
sure.
is not connecting.
Massage your
Okay.
vagus nerve for a second while you're gone. I'll be here.
I'll try not to pass out though. That can be
Okay.
a dangerous thing. Okay, be right back.
Impulse, don't lead me wrong. Take me where I belong forever. And if that's where you are, never be too far to be together. Everybody's searching, not everybody's finding, so we're one ahead. Everybody's wanting, and I want you to be with me, so come and fill my bed.
I can hear you. Welcome back. Shafer Stedron. Experiencing some technical difficulties here with Matthew, but we're going to get past it. How you doing now?
I am good. It's not connecting.
Oh, it's still not connecting.
Yeah, for some reason it's not.
This may just have to be a multi-part show that I'll have to slap together in whole different bits and parts and pieces.
I mean, I feel like I could talk to you. I was taking some notes because I was thinking, what's he going to ask me about? And I was like, well, he could ask me about literally anything.
Yeah, you may have watched my channel before, and you know that is exactly the way it goes.
And that's the way it should.
There you are with those damn Apple products.
You
know?
You did warn me that you're not a fan.
I did, but probably without enough notice.
I'm going to go to my Bluetooth and see.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. Ooh, the roller coaster begins.
Now.
There we go.
It's
now we're
good,
back.
Though. The audio, yeah, it's good. Perfect.
You're good. You're good. What I was saying before those techie interruptions, did you know that the human animal will eat and continue to eat until it's met its protein requirements? And that's why
Mm,
half of our audience right now are obese or type 2 or worse.
right. Yeah, absolutely. It matters what we're eating, not just how
Yeah.
much we're eating, the calories, what the constituents are. And I'm not a nutritionist, but absolutely, it's really important what we're eating. And also that we're drinking enough water too. That helps a lot
Hmm.
with the, feeling satiated.
I want to ask you about being a vegetarian a little bit more. I'd like to deep dive on this a little bit. Is that a moral or ethical decision, or do you think it's a health decision?
For me, it is on the face of it an ethical, moral decision. And it's just my decision. My children eat meat. My husband eats meat, although he does not eat much. And when we're together, we tend to eat meat less. And the children often threaten to be vegetarians, but they take those threats back quite quickly.
Who are they threatening to become vegetarians to? Is that to mommy?
No, they do. They want to become vegetarians because the ethical feelings really resonate. I think especially with children, they have a very strong, moral compass. They have a different relationship to animals than I think we have often as adults, not always, but often.
Right.
We get distracted by our own problems. We don't necessarily worry as much about animals as we did when we were children. So they talk about that, but they enjoy eating meat. So I just try to make sure that they are eating meat, that it's healthy meat. Like we don't eat hot dogs, right, because of the carcinogenic properties of them. We will sometimes eat a veggie dog if they're, for camping, and it's like,
Oh,
Mom,
yuck.
I know, but sometimes
It's
when you're a
funny.
kid,
The whole veggie dog thing, it's like it's so ultra processed, plus the
I know.
carbon footprint. It's worse than eating a regular goddamn hot dog.
Okay, I am
All
definitely
right.
going to note anti.
You're not one of those militant vegetarians, though, who just can't handle meat, like cuts it on the chopping board like that and then throws it on their plate and like a kosher family that has two different sets of dishes.
Mm. No, no, I'm not. And it's funny. And I did an episode on my podcast. I do solo episodes and guest episodes. And I did a solo episode and a blog post about becoming a vegetarian again, because I had actually been a vegetarian for 6 years before I got married. I got married very young. I was 20. And so
Mm,
I'd been a vegetarian for 6 years. And then my then spouse at the time did not want me to be a vegetarian and convinced me that I was unwell and all of these things. And so I started eating meat, even though that's not something that I wish to do.
right.
So over time, it became a habit. And then we were no longer married. And even though we had not been together, had not been cohabitating for quite some time, it comes back to habits. Like you said, we can be as philosophical as we want, but we're only as strong and as focused as our habits are. And my habit had been to eat meat, right? So
Hmm.
even though I never wanted to eat meat, that had become my habit. And it took a long time of being on my own and kind of flexing those muscles of I'm allowed to make my own choices to say,
Right.
I don't like eating meat. Why am I eating meat? Why am I doing this? And so then I just decided, well, you don't want to. I don't like the texture. I don't like the ethics. For me, it doesn't fit. And
Hmm.
so I'm going to stop putting myself into this box that doesn't fit me because, it's easier or whatever, right? When you have kids, sometimes it's easier to eat meat and to eat processed foods because that's what's available. But you can decide to do the hard thing and to just do what you believe in. And that's what I did. And it was so interesting because my daughter learned from that. And so even though she's not a vegetarian, she did start making different food choices because she was seeing me exercise my right and my capability to do so. So she's more thoughtful about what she eats now. And I'm curious to see how it evolves, but that's her journey. It's important that it's her journey for me.
Oh yeah, it's interesting that ever since I really became aware of vegetarianism and veganism and things like that, it really hasn't grown as far as the population. The percentage of vegetarians now is approximately what it was 20 years ago. And so it's not growing in popularity, nor is veganism. It's just more, there's more awareness of those types of dietary lifestyles, but not the numbers of people who are actually practicing them.
Right. That is interesting. And I'm sure there's some neuroscience behind that and some popular psych science behind that too.
There is,
That
and
we
you know
should look into.
what dovetails from that is that all restaurants will accommodate vegetarians and vegans on their menu, and yet the percentage of the population who practice those diets haven't grown, but every restaurant has had to shift and change.
Oh, that's interesting. And allergies too. I imagine that's also a big thing to need to accommodate to and be mindful of in the industry.
Well, yeah, you know, all of a sudden, I guess about 20 years ago, allergies are being insensitive to certain things. It exploded because it was popular, not necessarily because it was medically related. And so, yeah, it's really shifted the gears in the food world.
Absolutely. And what a challenging, I'm sorry, I'm so inspired to flip the script on you and start asking you about the challenges that you have in the food
You
world,
can have me
because
on your show, you know.
I want to. Please come on, because I'm fascinated by your industry, and I'm also fascinated by the work that people in your industry do in spheres people like yourself that are really passionate about healthy food, and making good choices and ethical choices. You know, I really would love to partner with someone who wanted to help change what our kids eat in school when their brains
Oh,
are
yeah.
developing.
Yeah, you know, but there's so much pushback on that. Although, you know, I'd be a perfect candidate to partner with on something like that, because I have my own understandings and my own kind of knowledge base of research and science that have to do with the food that we're putting into our pie hole every day.
Yeah, and our kids, when their brains are developing,
Wow.
right? When they need certain nutrients and
Yeah.
they're forming, like you said, yes, it's the nutrients. And that's the thing when you watch these medical podcast episodes, that it's very expert based, and it's very, you know, we're going to talk about glucose, we're going to talk about the amino acids and the ghrelin, we're going to talk about all these really scientific things, and you're going to walk away with all these new words in your vocabulary, but it's not going to shift your habits.
Right.
Yes, we need to teach the kids what these foods are, because some kids in food deserts don't even know. They can't name that
Oh,
many
yeah.
vegetables and fruits, right? They need to have the vocabulary, but they just need to have the habit, because if you're used to eating a grilled cheese with, you know, American cheese on it, which is such a sad name for
That's an
that product,
oxymoron, isn't it? American cheese. It's like military intelligence.
you know, if that's like, well, my school gives it to me, it must be healthy. And then you form a habit, and maybe on Tuesdays, because every Tuesday growing up you got a grilled cheese, now on Tuesdays, you know, at home you make yourself a grilled cheese, and then Friday's pizza day, because Friday was pizza day at school, and
Right.
now every
Right.
day is pizza day.
Exactly. I mean, it's sort of like prison in a sense, when you kind of get used to the foods, and the food is just, there's such a deep communication there, you know, and
Yeah.
you just really grasp onto that whole thing. Now, another left turn is going to happen right now. Do you believe in time travel?
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't know my opinion on that, but I do believe that we don't quite fully understand from a scientific basis our energy, right? We don't understand our energy. And it is true that nothing is created or destroyed. So what does that mean? So I have
Interesting that you
questions.
put it
Yeah.
like that. Okay, you have a
Yeah.
question. I'll field
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah. I mean, I have questions, right? What does that mean? I don't have answers about
Right.
that.
I was just greasing the wheels, because had you said yes or no, it really didn't matter with my next question that's going to follow.
Because you're a good interviewer. Exactly.
So, if you could travel back in time, knowing what you know now, Shafer, would you kill baby Hitler?
Wow. I didn't think that's exactly where you were taking this question. Wow. That's incredibly challenging because what would happen?
Right.
What would fill that void?
It's a ponderable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a showstopper, as a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's see. If you could instantly be an expert in any field other than your own, what would it be?
Mm. Oh, wow. That is such a good question. It requires so much contemplation for me. You know, I mean, maybe to be a true philosopher, right? I took a philosophical class at NYU when I was a freshman. And I'll never forget, I did a paper on Buddhism. And my grade, I have some papers here, so I'll show you. My grade was this. It was this symbol, which, on our audio, you don't know what that means. And I had a wonderful relationship with the professor. He was very complimentary, gave me, honors, all these things. But I was still at that stage in my development. What was I, 18 or 19? And I was like, thank you so much. Because I knew it meant that I had really managed to embody the concept. But I was also still at that phase of my development. And I've actually pondered upon this recently. And I thought, I wonder if a part of me is still in that phase of my development where I still need that feedback. But what is my grade? Thank you so much. That's beautiful. What is my grade?
That's great.
So I think to be a real student of philosophy and of all the world's philosophy would make life just so incredible and expansive. I'd love to have that much knowledge in that sphere.
Well, you seem to kind of like dance around in that sphere already.
And that's right. That's I guess why I'm interested and why I took those courses as a young person. But I think we get lost a bit and developing our expertise, developing, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to have a media company, I'm going to be a lawyer. And we go on those tracks. And then I think midlife crisis is misnamed. It's really a midlife mindset shift that is necessary where we take a step back and we say, who am I?
Would
Who do
it
I
be
want to
fair to
be?
offer up the fact that maybe you're a little bit burnt out on your neurological career and that medicine is not really what Shafer's all about, what Shafer's gonna be about?
Mm. It informs me greatly. And I chose neurology. So when you're in medical school and you're choosing your field, I had actually done everything I needed to do to go into dermatology, which is very competitive. So people who are doctors know when you say that, they're like, okay, you did the research, you were in the top 5% of your class, you did all the things, you were just marching towards this difficult to attain goal. And then in my third year of medical school, my last rotation of the year, to my recollection, I did neurology. I thought I'll just get this over with. And I fell in love with the patient and with their stories and their challenges. And the thing that always struck me about patients who have neurological disorders is the grace that they face these really, really challenging disorders and situations with. I mean, the grace is striking and inspiring. And so for me, there are systems in medicine that cause moral injury. And I don't like to get lost in the term burnout. It's a good, it gets us where we need to be in knowing what we're discussing, but
Yeah.
shortcuts are shortcuts and they're not great for really understanding the problem. So the moral injury of being an employed physician or of being a patient in a large system, I don't know how you wouldn't feel that no matter what position you have in medicine, but I would never want to have missed out on the beauty of coming into a room, some that you never know that has these really big challenges in their life, right? And you sit down and they're the expert on them, and yet they open up to you and they trust you and they're asking you for help in a way that they likely don't ask anyone else for. And that is just an utter privilege. And
Hmm.
I don't take that for granted any moment, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for when we podcast, you know, the listeners you have, the listeners I have. It's a similar sensation I get from knowing that they're welcoming us into their ears, into their time and their lives. It's such a privilege.
Oh, yeah, it really, really is. It's something that is very, very important. That kind of communication is just so incredible.
Yeah, I agree.
So if I know you are a musician because I've read your bio and I can just tell. If you were to write the soundtrack of your life, what kind of sound would it sound like?
Oh my goodness. That's so interesting. You know, my musical taste is similar to my bio, right? It's kind of
Hmm.
all over the place. I grew up listening to Natalie Cole, and my dad's a big Chris Bodie fan, you know, big jazz fan. So I grew up, that was the background. Um, but I was in R&B as a young person because when I was
Uh-huh.
14 recording music in Indianapolis, Indiana, it was an R&B place. That's what was recorded.
Right, right.
So those were the studios that I had access to. And then I did techno music when I moved to New York City and was living on couches when I was 17 years old, right? So I've done so many different things. And also plenty of, you know, more pop music, which the theme song to my show is one of the more pop type songs that I've written, but is also very mindset driven. It's called Impulse. I'm very proud of it. Um, I don't know how to answer other than if someone were to go to my Facebook group, We Don't Tell Our Stories, which is a community, and I have a website of the same name, we don't tell our stories.com, and see those resources if they do happen to be someone who's suffering from domestic abuse or know someone. What I try to do is from different times of that experience of experiencing domestic abuse, coming to the reckoning of it, it's happening to you, right? Because that's so different from just experiencing it, is accepting happening, going through that messy middle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Learning how to use your trigger detector, which is basically when things make me fearful and when they hurt, leaning in instead of leaning out. And then once you're through all of that, what does life look like now? And am I allowed to be happy? What am I allowed to do? Well, anything I want. So what I try to do with this community is through music, especially, but also articles and other podcasts and things. I try to often through music provide a way to have someone sit next to you in those moments, because some moments you can't say what the soundtrack is, because some moments you need the nitty gritty angry song, because, and that's honestly, you know, to name drop Taylor Swift, that's what she did right with TTPD, is
Mm-hmm.
that she did many things right, obviously, but she is unapologetically raw many times and says the thing that you're like, oh no, I don't want Taylor Swift to say that to my daughter. I want her to be more empowered than that. You know, she says, blanket, if I can't have him, I might just die. That's not really what she's saying. She's
Yeah.
saying, like we said earlier, I had this big emotion and I sat in it for a second and I allowed myself to feel it, and then I moved on. And so through my community, I try to give access to not just big artists like Taylor Swift that everyone hears, but other artists that are writing these amazing pieces of art. They're so vulnerable and connecting. Because when I was in the music industry, music looked very different and it was much
Mm-hmm.
more consumer pop, you know, write the thing that gets in the ear and people love. And now there's amazing vulnerable storytelling and community building going on
It
in the
really is.
world. And I try to create a soundtrack on We Don't Tell Our Stories to encapsulate that, so that someone else can just go there and hear something they would not have necessarily come across.
Are you still writing your music now and performing?
I do a little bit, mostly for my daughter. So, you know, because we do the theme song for What's Up Young Authors, and we want to incorporate more music, and we'll be doing audiobooks for her books. So my focus right now is on working with her to create things for her, which is a totally different artistry. And you're a musician as well.
Well, I have background in the industry, but not as a
Yeah.
player.
I had thought I'd heard you talking about you touring.
I did. I was with the Eagles,
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac, Pink Floyd, people like that.
Yeah.
But,
I can't
you know,
imagine.
merchandising and chef related capacity.
I'm
Yeah,
sure that
yeah.
was a wild experience.
The days I'll never remember.
I'll let that hang there and people can take, right? They can take what they want from that because you could go several ways.
I'm hoping that people are all over the place right now after hearing that.
I love it. Oh, there's
So,
wild, wild days when I think back to my days in music as a teenager, and I think I would not want my daughter to be there.
right. And you see, I never even had kids because I knew what it was all about once they got to that certain age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Tricky.
Okay. Definitely tricky. I'm proud of people like you who can handle in a good, healthy way having children in this society. What a messed up place the world can be.
It's a labor of love, but it gives you love in return. And I think that's what allows the cycle to keep going.
You know, you're a young woman, and I've noticed that post-COVID, since 2020, there's an astounding explosion of life coaches coming out of the
Mm,
woodwork. 20-year
yeah.
olds wanting to tell me how to handle my life and how to think and how to access this and that and how to spend my money and where to go and what to do and being a nomad and all that. It's just like crazy for, just to take a look at that. And these people have no life experience and
Mm.
education. So do you also view it like that? That it seems like it's a little bit out of control now, that things are out of whack?
It's an interesting question. I think if someone has gone through a program, if you actually have conversations with these young people, they really do have a lot to offer. But I think the importance comes to, as you mentioned earlier, knowing your audience.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, just like my 10-year-old daughter with her audience, she's a better person to talk to them about being a child philanthropist than I am.
Right.
And I was just at Podcast Movement this week, and there were, very young, hardworking, motivated, successful people there talking about their podcast. And I'm just like, yes, you're amazing. You're doing this work. You're making these connections. You're making life better. You're doing it from the perspective you have, which isn't a place of lack, right? And that's how people grow, is when I think it's easy to be judgmental. And yes, I don't know that the 20-year-old is going to bring the same perspective as the 40-year-old or the 60-year-old. They're all different perspectives, but there's an
Right.
audience for each person, you know? And
Right.
I
Right.
have heard some incredibly insightful, incredible things from young people. So I don't want to dispute their expertise, but I think it's just when you're a consumer or when you're a client or a patient, just being discerning about who is the person that will sit beside you, because that's what a life coach is. They're not a consultant. And if
Right.
they're telling you what to do, they're not coaching you. They're there to help you be your best you. So I think there is space for that, but we just all have to be really self-aware, the coach and the client. Absolutely.
That's such a diplomatic way to put it because I just really admire that because there were just everybody became a coach. Everyone started baking sourdough bread. Everyone started doing pottery.
I
It's
did too.
oh, there you go.
And it was good. It was good sourdough bread. It was,
And
I
what made
have
it
to say.
good? What made it good?
So I did it every single day. And I'd actually been doing it for years prior to COVID. But it was a part of the habits that were expected of me in that relationship. Um, and so after that relationship ended, I tried, after maybe 6 months or a year, I tried to do starter again, and I made it, and I let it just hang out in the fridge. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Uh-huh.
So I wonder when I'll get to the point, if ever, where I can do it again, because I have this emotional experience with that process, because it was expected of me, and it had a lot of layers to it. And that's the thing about making good choices with food. too is that there's an emotional layer to it that has to be addressed before you can make good choices or even reasonable choices that aren't just emotion based.
Right, right. Wow. Well, we really covered a lot of great ground. Do you see that there is a connection between good neurological health and diet and lifestyle? Is that all a combination of factors that are going to help us be healthier and better and happier?
I mean, that's the beginning, the fundaments of everything. You
Uh-huh.
can't be neurologically healthy without it. And I think that's why, for me, I'm very impact driven in the work I do, and you're very impact driven too. I'm not selling a supplement. I'm not selling something that's going to fix everything because you don't need to be fixed. You need to do the work. And sometimes you do need someone one on one to coach you to get there. Sometimes you need a podcast. Sometimes
Right,
you need to
right.
read a book. Whatever it is for you, I just want to be here to say you deserve to be invested in. And that will allow you to live the most beautiful life that you can, but you can't skip that step. You can't come to your doctor and have your headaches fixed if these primary issues of being abused, of being
Hmm.
unhappy, of having a mindset that is basically putting you in a box you don't fit in, you won't achieve one without the other. So you have to do the work. And I'm really just trying to spotlight that people are worth it and to stand beside them if that is a good fit for them on their journey.
Very good. So, after spending an hour or so here chatting face to face like we are, can you tell as a neurologist whether or not I'm fairly well adjusted?
That is an interesting thing. I think you absolutely are. I
Uh-huh.
think you are.
Who am
Um,
I to
I
dispute that?
also, I also feel like there like a partner that's waiting for the answer to this question, though. This is an interesting question.
Oh, you mean another one of my personalities, the partner, or
No, no, a partner. Like you're like, no, I'm gonna say I talked to a neurologist today because I can tell you when I meet people randomly, they will actually ask me this question.
is that right? Really?
Like I'm good, right? I'm good because I'm gonna tell my wife. I'm like, lovely. I don't know what to say.
That's so
No,
funny.
but
Yeah,
you're amazing, and I would love to have you as a guest on the show on Talks with Dr. Shafer, and I just so appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you on your show today.
it would be a blast to come aboard and do my thing with you on your show. I would love that. Is there anything, Schaefer, that I haven't asked you that's really important that I should have asked that you'd like to share?
No, you are so thorough. I would just love to direct anyone if they want to learn more about what I do to my website. It's www.drshaferstedron.com. And I'm so glad we started the hour with talking about that name because now it makes sense. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but it's beautiful. It means generous. And I appreciate people being generous with their lives to let me be a part of them, either through the podcast or through coaching and through being in their ears for this hour on your show. I really appreciate that.
Well, you've been a fantastic guest,
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure being here with you.
and we'll do it again soon, I hope, okay?
Sounds great.
Aloha, Schaefer.
Aloha.